I don't care what you say. Look, you tell you know who to get his you know what after you know where. And you two shut up.
The Jeffersons ran for 11 seasons, from 1975 to 1985, becoming one of television's most beloved sitcoms. For millions of viewers, Thursday nights meant spending time with George and Louise Jefferson in that deluxe apartment on Manhattan's Upper East Side. The show broke ground, featuring television's first prominent interracial couple and showing an affluent African-American family at a time when that was rarely seen. But even if you watched every episode and can sing the theme song word for word, there were plenty of small details you missed. Here are 15 small details you missed in The Jeffersons. Detail 15. The opening credits were filmed in 2 different cities.
The smartest movie you ever made. Do you know how to break zippers and tear off buttons?
When you watch George and Louise step out of that cab and walk into their fancy apartment building, you're actually watching 2 different locations edited together. For years, viewers had no idea they were looking at anything other than one continuous shot in New York City. The close-up shot of them exiting the taxi was filmed at a building in Santa Monica, California, while all the other exterior shots show the real Park Lane Towers at 185 East 85th Street in New York City. The clever editing fooled audiences for decades, but there were clues. The Santa Monica building has a doorman who holds open a regular door, while the New York building features a revolving door. The taxi gives it away too. In the Santa Monica footage, the cab has a black roof, but in the New York shots, it's a classic yellow cab. The production team did this because it was far more practical to film the actors in California, where the show was produced, than to send the entire cast and crew to New York for a few seconds of opening credits. Detail 14. Wheezy came from Sherman Hemsley's real childhood.
Hey, did you hear about Mr. Schneider getting mugged in the park last night?
No, but what was he doing in the...
Louise Jefferson's nickname wasn't in the original script or planned by the writers. It happened completely by accident and became one of the most endearing aspects of George and Louise's relationship. When Sherman Hemsley was growing up in Philadelphia, he had a crush on a neighborhood girl named Louise. Young Sherman started calling her Wheezy, and the name stuck in his memory for years. During filming of an early episode of The Jeffersons, Hemsley was doing a scene where George was having one of his typical outbursts. In the heat of the moment, he accidentally slipped into old habits and called his television wife Wheezy instead of Louise. The director and producers were in the control room when it happened, and they immediately perked up. The nickname felt natural and authentic, giving George and Louise's relationship an extra layer of intimacy and warmth. They asked Isabel Sanford how she felt about it, and she loved the idea. From that point forward, Louise became Wheezy to her husband, and audiences got to hear George call out Wheezy thousands of times over the show's 11-season run. It's one of those happy accidents that made the show feel more real and lived in. Detail 13. Isabel Sanford almost passed on the show.
Oh, hi again, Edith.
Oh, hi.
Haven't you finished packing yet? I'd be finished a lot quicker if you would help me.
The actress who brought Louise Jefferson to life almost walked away from what would become the role of a lifetime. Isabel Sanford was comfortable playing Louise on All in the Family, where the Jeffersons were the bunker's neighbors in Queens. The show was already a massive hit, and Sanford had steady work doing something she enjoyed. When Norman Lear approached her about spinning the Jeffersons off into their own series, she had serious reservations. She didn't want to take a chance on something audiences weren't already familiar with, and she genuinely didn't think a show focused solely on the Jefferson family would work without the bunkers. Sanford was ready to say no and stay where she was. That's when casting director Jane Murray stepped in with some very practical information. Murray explained that the network had already decided to greenlight the Jeffersons, with or without Sanford. If she chose not to do the spin-off, they would simply cast a new actress to play Louise Jefferson on the new show, and her character would be written out of All in the Family completely. Sanford would lose Louise either way. Faced with that reality, she reconsidered her position pretty quickly. Years later, looking back on her decision, she said she was grateful she took the leap and thanked God she went for it. The Jeffersons ran for 11 seasons and made her the first African-American woman to win an Emmy for Best Actress in a comedy series. Detail 12. Isabel Sanford didn't think Sherman Hemsley would work.
Oh, that's wonderful! Oh, you deserve a big kiss.
I sure do. But first I gotta show you something.
Even after Isabel Sanford agreed to do the Jeffersons, she had her doubts about the casting. When she first met Sherman Hemsley at the studio, she wasn't at all convinced that audiences would buy them as a married couple. An assistant had asked her to take this young man upstairs to meet with director John Rich, and Sanford looked him up and down with a critical eye. Hemsley was considerably younger than her, 21 years to be exact, and he was a small man who weighed about 135 pounds soaking wet. Sanford was 21 years older and had a more substantial presence. She later recalled looking at this little man and wondering why the director thought anyone in the world would believe they were married to each other. She admitted that she thought she could have squashed him like a bug if she'd wanted to. The height difference was significant, and she worried it would be distracting. Of course, time proved her completely wrong. The chemistry between Sanford and Hemsley turned out to be magical. Their differences actually worked in the show's favor, giving George and Louise a dynamic that felt authentic and lived in. After the show ended, the two were so identified with their roles that they were frequently hired as a team to appear in commercials and guest spots on other television shows. What Sanford initially saw as a mismatch became one of the most beloved partnerships in sitcom history. Detail 11. The cast had pet names for each other.
Thanks, honey. You look great, Wheezy. Thanks.
Behind the scenes at the Jeffersons, the relationships between cast members were warm and genuine. Sherman Hemsley and the rest of the cast called Isabel Sanford the Queen because of her regal bearing and natural air of authority. It wasn't a formal title. It just happened organically because that's how she carried herself. When Sanford walked onto the set, she had this presence that commanded respect. Both Marla Gibbs and Sherman Hemsley talked about this in interviews years later, making it clear that Sanford wasn't being difficult or demanding. She wasn't a diva who threw tantrums or made unreasonable requests. She was just naturally the queen bee, and everyone recognized that quality in her. There was something almost old Hollywood about the way Sanford conducted herself, a grace and dignity that seemed to come from another era. Sanford, for her part, had her own nickname for Sherman Hemsley. She called him Neck because she thought he was too scrawny and seemed to be all neck. It was said with affection, the way old friends tease each other. The height difference between them made the nickname even funnier, but beneath the teasing was genuine affection. They cared about each other, respected each other's craft, and built a partnership that lasted far beyond the show's 11 seasons. Detail 10. The theme song was written from personal experience. That iconic theme song, the one you can probably still sing word for word, came from a deeply personal place. Jeanette Dubois, who was already known for playing Willona Woods on Good Times, approached Norman Lear about expanding her role beyond acting. She wanted to do something with music, to showcase her talents as a singer and songwriter. Lear suggested she try her hand at writing a theme song for a new show he was developing. He told her it was about a dry cleaning business owner and his family, but he didn't give her much more detail. Dubois went home and struggled with the composition. She couldn't quite capture what Lear wanted, and the melody and lyrics weren't coming together. Then her mother said something that changed everything. She reminded Dubois of the dreams she'd always had, the promises she'd made about giving her mother a comfortable retirement, about moving her up to something better. That conversation unlocked something in Dubois. She sat down and wrote from her heart, channeling her own journey of upward mobility and success. When she brought the finished song to Lear, he was amazed. Without fully explaining the show's concept, Dubois had captured the entire essence of what The Jeffersons was about. The song became an anthem, not just for the show, but for anyone who'd ever worked hard to improve their circumstances and achieve their dreams. Detail 9. There were two different Lionels.
Well, is your son drinking or just taking a bar space?
I'll have a Coke.
A Coke? Well, I guess I can buy...
If you watched The Jeffersons from the beginning, you might have noticed that Lionel Jefferson looked different after the first season. Mike Evans originated the role when the Jeffersons first appeared as neighbors to the Bunkers on All in the Family, and he continued playing Lionel when the show spun off into its own series in 1975. Evans brought a specific energy to the character, a young man trying to navigate the world while dealing with his father's opinions and expectations. But after the first season of The Jeffersons, Evans left the show and was replaced by Damon Evans. Despite sharing the same last name, the two actors weren't related at all. It was just a coincidence that made things a bit confusing for viewers. Damon Evans played Lionel from 1976 through 1978. bringing his own interpretation to the role. The character's relationship with his wife Jenny and his parents took on a slightly different tone during those years. Then, in 1979, Mike Evans returned to the role and continued playing Lionel until the character was eventually written out of the show. The back and forth happened because Mike Evans had co-created the sitcom Good Times with Eric Monty, and he had commitments to that show. Later in life, Damon Evans admitted in interviews that he came to regret taking the role of Lionel. He said he would regularly miss rehearsals and didn't particularly enjoy working on a sitcom, which might explain why his tenure on the show was relatively brief. Detail 8. Marla Gibbs kept her day job for 2 years.
What money you laying out, Mr. Jefferson? You could have let me cater it.
Florence, I'm opening a new office, not a morgue.
When Marla Gibbs landed the role of Florence Johnston, the Jefferson family's sassy maid, she'd already been working at United Airlines as a reservation agent for 11 years. Acting was something she did on the side, appearing in plays during her spare time, but it wasn't paying the bills. The United Airlines job was stable, offered benefits, and helped her support herself. When she was called in to audition for the Jeffersons, the character of Florence wasn't supposed to be a major part of the show. The producers wanted someone for a small, one-time appearance in a single episode. Gibbs came in, did her scene, and figured that would be the end of it. But something magical happened. The audience response to Florence was overwhelming. People loved her wit, her timing, her willingness to give George Jefferson as good as she got. The producers called Gibbs back for another episode, and then another. Eventually, they offered her a contract, but even then, it was only for 7 episodes. Florence had to alternate screen time with Zara Cully's Mother Jefferson character, so there was no guarantee the role would continue beyond those initial episodes. Because of all this uncertainty, Gibbs kept her job at United Airlines for 2 full years after joining the cast. She'd go to work at the airline, then head to rehearsals and tapings. Only after the Jeffersons proved to be a solid hit, and Florence became a permanent fixture, did Gibbs finally feel secure enough to leave the airline and commit to acting full-time. Detail 7. Paul Benedict wasn't actually British.
Time for negotiation, yes, but there was also a time for action.
And now's the time for action, right?
Right.
Harry Bentley spoke with such a refined, proper British accent that audiences were absolutely convinced Paul Benedict must have been from England. Everything about the character suggested authenticity, from the way he pronounced his words to his mannerisms and bearing. Bentley would tell long, boring stories about his childhood in England and his relatives back home, and Benedict sold every single word with complete conviction. For 11 seasons, viewers watched this British gentleman living next door to the Jeffersons, working as a translator at the United Nations. But here's the truth that surprised people for years after the show ended. Paul Benedict wasn't British at all. He was born in Silver City, New Mexico, and grew up in Massachusetts. He was as American as apple pie, despite playing one of television's most memorable British characters. Benedict's accent and mannerisms were entirely constructed for the role, the result of careful study and dedicated performance. He was such a skilled actor that he fooled millions of viewers. Even after the Jeffersons ended, Benedict mentioned in interviews that he was constantly approached by people who assumed he was British. They'd be shocked when he spoke to them in his natural American accent. Some people even argued with him about it, insisting he must actually be British. Benedict found it amusing. He'd created a character so believable that people couldn't separate the actor from the role. Detail 6. An audience member diagnosed Paul Benedict's medical condition.
To see his face when you whip out old thunder and lightning.
Oh, Bentley, shut up.
Paul Benedict was known for his distinctive appearance. His oversized jaw, large nose, unusually large hands, and prominent feet made him stand out, and these features became part of what made his character Harry Bentley so memorable. But Benedict didn't always know why he looked the way he did. The disproportionate growth began when he was in high school, and it continued to develop over the years. He went to doctors trying to understand what was happening to his body, but none of them could give him a diagnosis. It was frustrating and concerning, but without answers, there wasn't much he could do except live with it. Years later, in 1964, Benedict was performing with the Theatre Company of Boston in a co-starring role. One evening during a performance, someone in the audience was paying very close attention, not just to the play, but to Benedict himself. After the show ended, an usher approached Benedict with a note. Someone wanted to meet with him in the lobby. Benedict went down, probably expecting a typical fan interaction, but this was something entirely different. The man introduced himself as a radiologist and explained that he'd written the note because he recognized symptoms he'd seen before. He asked Benedict if he'd ever been diagnosed with acromegaly, a hormonal disorder where the pituitary gland produces too much growth hormone, typically during adulthood. Benedict had never heard the term before, but the radiologist explained that it was a condition that causes excessive growth in the bones and bodily extremities, particularly affecting the hands, feet, and facial features. The man encouraged Benedict to see an endocrinologist for proper testing and treatment. Benedict followed the advice, and sure enough, the diagnosis was confirmed. He underwent a surgical procedure that lasted about 20 minutes and helped stop the condition's progression. That chance encounter with an observant audience member quite literally changed Benedict's life and potentially extended it, since untreated acromegaly can lead to serious health complications. Detail 5. The show changed time slots 15 different times.
Wait a minute. What offer?
We'd love to have you go with us, right, George?
What offer?
Most successful television shows find a comfortable time slot and stay there for years. Audiences learn when their favorite show airs and build it into their weekly routine, not the Jeffersons. Over its 11-year run, CBS moved the show to different nights and different times at least 15 times. This was highly unusual for such a popular long-running series. The constant changes should have hurt viewership, but audiences kept finding it and tuning in week after week, no matter when it aired. Detail 4. Zara Cully's character died with her.
And what? Just hello, Mama. Don't you have anything else to say?
Zara Cully played Mother Jefferson, George's sharp-tongued mother who never hesitated to put her son in his place when he got too full of himself. Mother Jefferson was the one person George actually listened to, the one person who could cut through his bluster and bring him back down to earth. Cully brought a special kind of authority to the role, mixing toughness with love in a way that felt authentic. She'd been performing for decades before landing the role, working in theater, film, and television, building up the experience and skill that made her perfect for Mother Jefferson. When Zara Cully passed away during the 4th season in 1978, the show's writers faced a difficult decision. They could recast the role and bring in a new actress to play Mother Jefferson, which was common practice in television at the time, or they could acknowledge what had happened and write the character out permanently. Norman Lear and the writing staff chose to honor Cully by having Mother Jefferson die as well. It was a decision made out of respect for the actress and recognition that she'd brought something irreplaceable to the role. The show addressed Mother Jefferson's death in the storyline, giving the character a proper goodbye and allowing George and the family to grieve. It was a touching acknowledgement that some people can't be replaced, that what Zara Cully brought to the show was unique and couldn't be duplicated by another performer. For the remaining 7 seasons, Mother Jefferson was gone, but not forgotten. Characters would occasionally reference her, remembering something she'd said or done, keeping her memory alive in the Jefferson family's story. Detail 3. Roxy Roker's real life mirrored her character.
Mom, would you please pinch me?
Sure, may I pick my spot?
The Jeffersons broke ground by featuring television's first prominently portrayed interracial married couple with Tom and Helen Willis. In 1975, this was still somewhat controversial. Interracial marriage had only been legal nationwide since 1967, just 8 years before the show premiered. Network executives at CBS were nervous about showing an interracial couple, particularly one that was affectionate with each other. During the first episode, there was even a scene with Tom and Helen kissing, and executives tried to get it edited out. Producer Fred Silverman had to fight to keep it in the show. When Roxy Roker came in for her casting interview to play Helen Willis, the producers had an important question for her. They asked if she'd be comfortable playing a character who had a white husband. It was a reasonable question to ask in those days, given the sensitive nature of the subject matter. Roker's response was perfect. She didn't say a word. She simply reached into her purse, pulled out a photograph, and showed it to the casting team. It was a picture of her real-life husband, Cy Kravitz, who was white and Jewish. The producers immediately knew they'd found their Helen Willis. Roxy and Cy's marriage was strong and loving, and they had a son together who would grow up to become quite famous in his own right. That son is Lenny Kravitz, the musician and actor. When Lenny was young, he used to visit his mother on the set of The Jeffersons, running around the soundstage and watching the tapings. Years later, he'd have his own successful career in entertainment, proving that talent truly does run in the family. Roxy's daughter from that marriage, Lenny's half-sister, is actress Zoe Kravitz, continuing the family's legacy in show business. Detail 2. CBS canceled the show without telling anyone.
I did. Come on, Wheeze, don't be modest. Remember you said it was brilliant?
Yeah.
After 11 seasons and 253 episodes, The Jeffersons came to an abrupt and unceremonious end in 1985. The final episode that aired, titled Red Robins, was broadcast on July 2nd. It was a perfectly fine episode about George helping his granddaughter Jessica with her Red Robins group, but it wasn't written as a series finale. There was no farewell party, no special goodbye, no acknowledgement that this was the last time viewers would see the Jefferson family. That's because nobody involved with the show knew it was ending. CBS had made the decision to cancel The Jeffersons at their upfront presentation to advertisers in May of 1985, nearly 2 full months before that final episode aired. But in what has to be one of the most disrespectful moves in television history, the network didn't bother to inform the cast or crew. These people had dedicated 11 years of their lives to making this show, and they found out it was over by reading about it in the newspaper or hearing about it on television. Sherman Hemsley, who'd played George Jefferson for over a decade, learned that the show was canceled when he opened up his morning newspaper and saw the announcement. He had no advance warning, no phone call from the network. Nothing. Isabel Sanford, who played Louise, heard about the cancellation from her cousin, who'd read about it in the tabloids and called to ask if it was true. Sanford didn't know. She had to confirm it herself before she could believe it. Franklin Cover, who played Tom Willis, was watching Entertainment Tonight one evening when they announced that the Jeffersons had been canceled. That's how he found out. The cast later gathered to process what had happened, and Sanford spoke publicly about how disrespectful she found the whole thing. These actors deserved better than finding out their show was over through secondhand sources. They deserved a proper goodbye, a chance to end the series on their own terms, and the dignity of being told directly by the people who'd made the decision. Detail 1. The show was still doing well when it was canceled.
Bonnie of Venice. Sports coat by Guido Albione. Shirt by...
The most frustrating part about how The Jeffersons ended is that the show wasn't failing when CBS pulled the plug. During the 1984 to 1985 season, The Jeffersons was still pulling in strong ratings and ranking among the top 20 shows on television. Audiences were still tuning in faithfully every week. The writing was still sharp, the performances were still engaging, and there was no indication that viewers were tired of the Jefferson family and their neighbors. If anything, after 11 seasons, the show had settled into a comfortable groove where everyone knew these characters and cared about what happened to them. So why did CBS cancel it? The network wasn't canceling The Jeffersons because of poor performance. They were systematically clearing out their schedule of anything that had originated in the 1970s, regardless of how well those shows were doing. CBS wanted to rebrand themselves as fresh and modern, and that meant getting rid of the old guard to make room for new programming. Along with The Jeffersons, shows like Alice, The Love Boat, The Facts of Life, and Heart to Heart all got the axe around the same time. These were established hits with loyal audiences, but the network decided they represented an older era that needed to end. The irony is that most of the new shows that replaced The Jeffersons and its contemporaries didn't last more than a season or two. They came and went without making much of an impact, while The Jeffersons remains a beloved classic that people still watch and talk about decades later. The show has continued to find new audiences through syndication, streaming services, and DVD collections. In 2019, ABC even produced a live recreation of classic episodes that drew millions of viewers, proving that the appeal of The Jeffersons hasn't faded. CBS made a business decision in 1985, but history has shown that they ended something special before its time. The Jeffersons gave us 11 seasons of laughter, groundbreaking representation, and memorable characters that still resonate today. From Sherman Hemsley's portrayal of George Jefferson to Isabel Sanford's warm Louise, from Marla Gibbs's scene-stealing Florence to Paul Benedict's unforgettable Harry Bentley, the show assembled a cast that brought these characters to life. The theme song that Jeanette Dubois wrote from her heart became an anthem not just for the show, but for anyone who'd ever worked hard to improve their circumstances and achieve their dreams. Behind the cameras, the show was shaped by talented actors who brought their own experiences to their roles, by writers who weren't afraid to tackle important social issues while still making people laugh, and by Norman Lear, who understood that television could entertain and enlighten at the same time. The fact that CBS canceled it so disrespectfully remains one of the more shameful moments in television history, but even that couldn't diminish what the Jeffersons accomplished during its run. The show gave us television's first prominently featured interracial couple at a time when that was still controversial. It showed an affluent African-American family living the American dream when that was rarely seen on network television. It made us laugh while making us think, and it created characters we genuinely cared about. More than 40 years after it first premiered, The Jeffersons continues to find new audiences who discover what viewers in the 70s and 80s already knew. This was something special. If you enjoyed learning these details about The Jeffersons, please like and subscribe for more classic TV content. Thanks for watching, and remember, we're all just trying to get our piece of that pie.